Society tells us that we're a paycheck, right? Society tells us that if we're paying child support, we're a good dad. Society has also said that men are bumbling, stumbling idiots when it comes to fatherhood, right?
Today's guest is Dr. Jeffrey Shears, professor of social work at UNC Charlotte, co-chair of the Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy, author of What All Dads Should Know, and later founder of Dads Know. His work examines how fathers shape children's development with a special focus on fatherhood and fathers' influence on children's development.
When I started doing this research over 20 years ago, we didn't even ask fathers about what they did with their child. All the fatherhood stuff was really researchers asking moms what dads did. If you ask most people on the street, what are the unique contributions that fathers make in the lives of children? Most people are amiss and cannot name that other than being a provider. And we know through the data and science that fathers offer something unique in the lives of children. We know when fathers are in the rough and tumble play that children have higher levels of self-regulation. Dad comes in, starts rough and tumbling play, child's activity level goes here. We know that children rarely experience that with their mothers, the experience of their fathers, and that increases a child's self-regulation, the ability to control their emotions, and self-regulation is highly correlated with school readiness. Don't allow society to tell you you're just a provider. If you think back on your life, rarely you're going to remember what your dad bought you. You're going to remember the times that are spent. Let's dance.
Welcome to the Dadera podcast, redefining what it means to be a dad, one story at a time. Today's guest is Dr. Jeffrey Shears, professor of social work at UNC Charlotte, co-chair of the Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy, author of What All Dads Should Know, can't wait to talk about that, and later founder of Dads Know. His work examines how fathers shape children's development with a special focus on fatherhood and fathers' influence on children's development. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation. Excited to be here.
Me too. So before we dive in, what's one sentence you wish every dad heard this week?
You matter, and you are super important to children's development. Matter of fact, you as a father offer unique experience to your children. So what you do as a dad is unique and important to your child's development.
Unique, special, and important. I love it. So, why do you think, before we get into, your backstory, which I'm super excited to hear about and to learn more about you from what I already know, why do you think that's even a sentence that even has to get out there? Like, isn't it, our dads, do they kind of just like wake up, put on their suit, go to work? They just think they have to provide, and some of this stuff they don't really think about? Or what do you think some of the cause?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, that I often say that everybody understand moms are important. You ask just a regular person on the street, are moms important in the lives of children? They would say, yes, of course. Just a regular lay person on the street can probably expound and give you unique things that moms do or their importance. If you ask most people on the street, are fathers important? They would probably say, well, yes, if you have one. And then if you ask them, what are the unique contributions that fathers make in the lives of children? Most people are amiss and cannot name that other than being a provider. And we know through the data and science that fathers offer something unique in the lives of children. One example I love to give is, when a child is a toddler, dad comes in the room, what's the first thing he does? Rough and tumble play, picking the child up, tossing him in the air.
Over his shoulder, exactly.
Yeah, physical play. And we know that children rarely experience that with their mothers. And, so what does that offer? What contributions does that make to a child? Well, we know when fathers are in the rough and tumble play, that children have higher levels of self-regulation. You imagine a child is flatline, just chilling on the floor. Dad comes in, starts rough and tumbling play. The child's activity level goes here. Dad plays with the child 30 seconds or a minute, sets the child down, and kind of leaves the room. We know that children rarely experience that with their mothers, the experience of their fathers, and that increases a child's self-regulation, the ability to control their emotions. And self-regulation is highly correlated with school readiness. So when fathers don't understand that, right, they don't understand their importance. They think that they're just a paycheck. No, the way you father matters. The way you interact with your child matters. I can go into several more things, but right there, that's just one that kind of resonates with men. Like, yeah, what I do as of naturally is important to the development of a child.
That's amazing. So like it's so cool. Some of us dads, myself included, I have two little girls. They're 7 and 9. And like I would just call it Jeff, I would just call it loving on them, right? You come home, they're sitting there, they're watching Coco Melon, which honestly, if I had to watch that again, I would rethink, being a dad, but that's another story. But they're sitting there doing the thing and you just go love on them, like squeeze them, kiss them, do the thing, make them laugh, do all that stuff. But it is cool, and you talk about love languages, right? Some of us have different love languages or how we
Right.
show kids love. So for that perspective, it's so cool that it's actually backed up from science. So you got into the fatherhood research space, and it's so interesting thing being a dad, right? To your point, or what does it mean in this modern day and age to be a dad, to be a present dad? It's actually, there's some research behind it. So when did you realize that this was actually your life's work? When did you get so hyped about it?
Well, I went, so my area of research early on, as I entered a PhD program was uh, juvenile delinquency. I worked in juvenile justice. I worked in the juvenile justice system, and my own personal experience with a lot of guys I hung out with in high school, and why did I end up going to college and going to get a graduate degree, and so many of them chose other paths in life. And I started to realize that even though I was in the juvenile justice space, or um, that the thing for me personally, I think, was that I grew up in a house with a dad. A lot of my friends didn't. And I knew that my father had protected me and guided me and things of that nature from, you know, uh, other lifestyles or what have you. And so that was kind of on my mind. And then I had the opportunity, to be very honest with you, like everything was around juvenile justice and overrepresentation of African American males, in the juvenile justice system, in the penal system. And I was approached to run a fatherhood study because I was doing a lot of quantitative research in my PhD program. And that kind of turned me on to understanding fatherhood. As a matter of fact, I often joke that when I started doing fatherhood research years ago, over 27 years ago, I wasn't a dad. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. And by the time I started conducting more research and publishing more research, I joke I got some street cred while I started doing fatherhood research. I ran out and got married and had some kids. So I had a little street cred now that I was a father. But I was doing fatherhood research as a single man, but starting to realize, again, how important generational fathering was in my family. My grandfather raised my dad. My dad raised me. I, in turn, raised my daughters. But just getting to the space, starting to realize my own life experiences, how my father protected me, had guided me, that a lot of men didn't have those experiences and so didn't understand how important fatherhood was. And so I also just want to add that when I got into this area of research, we were doing early infant development. We didn't even ask fathers questions. It was all about moms. And when I started doing this research over 20 years ago, we didn't even ask fathers about what they did with their child, particularly early infant development, early childhood. All the fatherhood stuff was really researchers asking moms what dads did. So, but does my heart good for me to be running a Fatherhood Institute, for us to be having podcasts around the importance of fathers? Because, again, just want to reiterate, when I started this work over 20 years ago, there were none of these things going on in regards to understanding the importance of fathering and educating men on how important they are in the lives of children.
Yeah, and I felt the same. I mean, even, this year when I zoomed out 30,000 feet, and here I am. I'm turning 44 actually on Thursday. I can't
Congratulations.
believe
Happy birthday.
Thank you, buddy. This interview is my birthday present. That's what happened when you turn 44. There's no more wild parties and no more crazy gifts. You
That's
get to do
right.
cool things like this. Um, I felt like for me in the dad space, I take it really serious. I mean, listen, I understand I have two little girls. They're 7 and 9. To the point of turning 44, I can't believe I have a 10-year-old next year. I don't know if I'm having a midlife crisis or if things are moving fast. My grandfather, who, super important to me, he taught me, as you get older, time moves faster, right? But then I was like, well, what could I do to improve, right? Earlier this year, I'm on a bit of a weight loss journey, Jeff. I know you can't tell the stud across the virtual side, but I did 75 hard. It's very aggressive, 2 workouts a day and lots of water, no alcohol drinking, going to bed at a certain time, reading a book. So that was cool. And that was like the operating system called to lose some weight or get a Peloton or, hop on a treadmill, things like that. There was growth day, which was awesome. You work on personal development. And so what I realized, where's the thing for dads? Like and listen, I'm an entrepreneur. I own a mortgage company. Financially, I do pretty well. So like I would, contribute financially to something I thought, would help. And I realized that there really isn't something for dads. There's we're GIFs, we're memes, we're dad jokes. Right now in my book, Jeff, or right now in my car, Jeff, I actually have a book called Dad Jokes. And my kids, like, we think it's funny on the way to school. They read these like horrific rated G, hokey dad jokes. But like, where are we outside of like a Barstool Sports where there's a dad by the pool, saving the kid from falling in, or the commercials where the woman comes home typically and the dad is with the kids and there's a mess. And it's like, oh, come on, honey. And I realized that I just think it was, to your point of 20 years ago, the research. Now bring that forward another 20 years. I feel like it's time to make the thing around what can we do as a group or society to really push the agenda that being present, my thing is we're phrasing being present as attentive presence. There's a lot of research from, different people that have written books around it, and they haven't coined the term, but, just what it looks like to be there and not just be there physically, which I feel like, especially in my demographic of dads, there's so many guys that are there physically, but actually being attentive and how that correlates to your child and how they feel about their self-worth. That's a big focus for us. And I wouldn't say we have the research that you do naturally, but this is just something that's really our passion, and we're really trying to move the agenda. So if you looked back, you kind of touched upon it, but I'm curious to ask you, someone who I respect with all the degrees, amazing in this field, if you looked back and you said, all right, this was like one or two things my dad, because you gave a story of you were able to kind of grow up where you did. Others didn't have a present dad. Your dad was present. And you kind of equate a portion of, you take some credit yourself, portion of that with where you've come in life is because of your amazing dad, which it sounds like. What are one or two things you could attribute to him that he did in that, fatherhood, being present arena, helping you through? And what do you think that one thing you think he could have done a little better?
That's a good question. So it resonates with me that I have a younger brother, and my father was intentional in his fathering. We kind of joke about it now, but my dad was not just intentional in fathering, but he was intentional in raising men. And when I say raising men, raising responsible citizens, fathers, husbands, and now in his old tender age of 80, he hugs my brother and I right now, just out of degrees and professional accomplishments and all the things that my brother and I have experienced in life. He hugs us now and says, man, I'm so proud, man. Y'all are great fathers, great husbands, and great fathers. And I can see it now full circle from when I was a kid or a teenager, and, crazy stuff as dads do or say, I'm not gonna be worried about my grandkids, stuff he would say. And my brother and I joke, it's like, 10, like what is he talking about? I'm not gonna be just teach us responsibility and things of that nature. I can go back and say, hey, this dude was intentional. I guess the one thing I guess that resonates a little bit, I knew my dad loved me. He knew he cared for us. Now that he's a little older, he can't get off the phone, man, I love you. And probably didn't hear that a whole lot growing up. Think he grew up in a little different era that might not have been a cool thing to say, but we all have grace, and I always knew it. He always showed it. But yeah, but I think by the time we left the house and my brother and I was away in college and things, now it was like, okay, I miss these guys, and he started really sharing. And now, like I say, can't even get off the phone. Hey man, I love you, proud of you. But we all have, for the most part, again, he was intentional. And going back to a point that you just made, in regards to being present, like we first started doing this work in the fatherhood sphere, it was really about residential and non-residential fathers, right? And we quickly learned that we have a lot of residential dads who aren't present. And we may have, we probably have a lot of non-residential fathers who are super present. I got a couple buddies who are really dear friends of mine who, even though they might live 4 or 5 hours away from their kid, they don't miss a PTA meeting. They talk to their kid every day. They do all the things. And so we really got away from, you can be intentionally present and not necessarily be residential. And you could be a residential dad, live in a household, but not be present. And so I think part of, again, referencing my father, he was intentional in how he fathered us, or I always say to folks like, hey, your kids grow to your expectations, and so having high expectations of my brother and I, and again, not just performance based, not just how we did in school or this, that, and the other, but the end game is like, hey man, you guys are great husbands, you're great fathers. And I think that's a fulfillment of his intentionality in my brother and I in my life.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it sounds like you had a great dad. So I could just tell you, one of our big passions, especially at Dad Are Up, is listen, I have two little girls. So like if I'm gonna be a girl dad, when you really like sell out to the girl dad space and you really do the thing, of course, there's a lot of emotions. My kids are cool, they play soccer. My youngest is almost like too tough, maybe a little elbow out there during, which I'm proud because, probably not gonna play football, but I have certainly, I was definitely born to be a girl dad, so I certainly welcome, being there, being emotional, asking about their day. I always talk about how it's important to ask open-ended questions. I'm like, how was your day? Good. And then you're on an iPad, like you have to get into the emotions. But why do you think some dads struggle potentially with sons, with boys? I feel, our position is that it has to do with what we started with, which is that dads are, they're the provider and they're supposed to be tough and guys figure it out. And, for me, to me, what's a dadder? A dadder is a member of Dad Are Up, and it's like they could be like CrossFit meets Navy SEALs meets like just like a cool intentional dad. But it's okay. It's
That's
okay
right.
to have feelings. It's okay to have emotions. To me, the big thing is like I'm not standing up here telling you, Jeff, I'm the best dad in the world. I am working on it. I'm progress before perfection. But no dad, I think, is perfect. But I could tell you there's some kind of a disconnect with dads and sometimes with sons, to your point. What's one thing we could do to help potentially change that narrative or tell guys, hey, it's okay to be emotional with your sons?
Yeah. So just in general, and remember I'm a girl dad too, so I have
You
three
flying
three
the flag
daughters.
just like me.
Yeah, yeah. So I think just across the board. So first of all, we have plenty of literature, not plenty of literature, but a lot more literature about, fathers and sons and the whole lineage and all the things that we think about raising sons. We have
My
less,
namesake, right? My
that's right,
namesake.
names say, yeah, yeah. And we have less literature on the importance of fathers and daughters, which I guess, again, hits near and dear to my heart. But it's important if you want to know how you're doing as a dad, regardless of the gender of your child, just ask. I encourage guys when I do workshops or talks, whatever, to do periodic check-ins and ask your child, how am I doing as a dad? Because it's telling, and be open to your 6-year-old feedback. Be open to your 8-year-old feedback about what they're perceiving, because perception is greater than reality. So, here I am, and I share my story of Jake. I asked Jada this. She was in third grade, the youngest. And here I am, on talk circuit, researching dads, author. This is what I do. So I do my periodic check in, like, hey, how am I doing as a dad? And she's like, oh, you good, so and so, so and so. I said, no, did like really tell me how I'm doing? She said, you're always on your phone.
Jeff, when you're done, I got a story for you. Keep going.
So
Now I'm not going to text you anymore.
no, so I was a little, I was like, okay, the third grade stuff, like, you're always on your phone or whatever. And so I said, okay, what I do with this? And I was like, okay, all right. So man, I don't know. It seemed like forever for 3 or 4 months straight. If I'm on the phone, like she was in charter school, so I'll pick her up from school every day, and so I make sure I'm off the phone when I get in the drive-through line. I wouldn't come in the house on the phone. I would finish my conversation and come in the house or whatever. And this is, make the story short. So one day we're riding in silence, and I'm thinking, man, I would get on the phone, I could be getting some work done, I could be doing
Yeah.
whatever. We're just riding in silence, and I'm being intentional. That's what she said. Like her perception, I'm always on the phone, and that's when it hit me, man. It was a heartfelt moment, to be honest with you. Her third grade self's like, Daddy, have you ever thought about? I don't remember the question. Have you ever thought about so and so, so and so? And I was like, no, I never thought about that. And we had a little discussion about it, and just back quiet again, just riding on the road, just listen to no radio, just listen to the wheels and traffic. And then she a little bit later said, Daddy, you know what I thought of the other day? I thought of, again, I don't remember what she said, but that's when it hit me. It dawned on me that she wanted to share her heart with her father, but she perceived that I was too busy because I was on the phone. I was always preoccupied. So that would have been, I would, if I hadn't asked a question about how am I as a dad, I never would have known that. I mean, maybe I would have known later in life, which, she tell me as a teenager and adult, but I never would have known, And so, um, as it's like, if you want to know how your product is doing, go ask the consumer. You want to know how you're doing as a dad, go check with the consumer. How am I doing? How can I improve? How can I get better? Because your kids can answer the question about what they need from you. And so I just encourage all dads, again, regardless of gender of your child, just check in periodically every 6 months, just checking how am I doing as a dad.
So I have a similar story. You want to hear it?
No, I do. Love to hear it.
So, especially nowadays, right, going in 2026, big social media world, lots of content. Lucky enough, I was able, with my team, we started a digital marketing team. So we have obviously a big push going on for our data upside. So of course, what do? My two daughters love doing content. I've been doing it with them for a handful of years. They're in, we're doing it. My youngest looks so cute wearing like the data up white hat. She has big blue eyes like I do. My oldest, I think she was wearing like one of the sweatshirts for me is like a double or triple X. It looked like almost like a dress, but she looked so awesome. And my team, they ask the questions. They're like, what's one thing, you would love to do, whatever it is, based around your father? He's like, just want him to be off his phone more. And I'm like, ha ha ha. Like, and then it's like, where's one place you want to go with your dad or whatever? Oh, you would go there as long as he's off his phone. And honestly, Jeff, they've never dug into me that aggressive as they were. And it was like one of those things, kick a man when he's down. And it's just like the next question. And my older one too, my older one, I don't know with your kids, my older one is like my heart. My younger one is logic. Like 1 + 1 is 2. But no, Daniela, she was laying into me. Like what I do initially, I did the human being thing. I took it personal, and I was a little bit, I took it a little personal. Being a great dad's important to me, but also, I work really hard and provide and all those good things like we've talked about. So when we got home, and I think she knew, I'm glad she felt safe enough to say that, to your point of like asking them that they feel safe to give you the answer. But she knew that I was a little upset. I think, because I'm doing the 10,000 steps. I went out and did, a couple miles, and she was there, and she's like, Daddy, what's wrong? And she knew. And I was like, Danielle, I love you, but what you did really embarrassed me. And then she started at home. She started to cry. And like, I don't know you, Jeff, I'm a big guy. I'm a leaker. If my kids cry, anyone cries, like I cry. So like everyone's crying now. And she said, it's hard for me to tell you because I don't want to hurt your feelings. But every time we're doing stuff and you go on your phone, it really hurts my feelings. And I feel like you don't want to be. And that's to your point. I had the moment and I was like, right in the heart, man.
Been there.
And we had the best conversation. This was honestly a little bit preemptive because of the circumstance or scenario, but the best conversation. We created a word. It's not a safe word, but like the word chicken. So like now she says, if she looks at me and gives me the word chicken, we have this joke in my house, the laundry room, because my kids are, smaller. I can pick them up and put them on like the dryer. So they're on the same, because I'm tall, and I let them talk. I don't say a word and I listen. So we created like this safe environment where if they want us, we call it the office. We'll go to the office, which is really the laundry room. But we created that, and because of that, I have felt, it was probably about a month or 2 months ago, I felt a remarkable, closer, you call it father-daughter intimacy, like a closeness and emotional closeness with my two kids. I know that the younger one, she doesn't have any type of reservation. She'll say it, big heart, but like the older one, she's more of an empath, doesn't want to hurt daddy's feelings. And, we have a very good relationship. So similar to you, I got called out hard in front of a lot of people. But it was true. Now I talk about some of different strategies to be better at being present, one of which is, like we said, open-ended questions where they just want to ask them questions. So like your daughter in the car, they just start talking and talking. That strategy. But one of them is if you have multiple kids, one-on-one time. Yes. I find with my daughters, if I spend time with one, they open up, like almost like blossom into the conversation where I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. They have the younger one especially has such FOMO. If the older one's doing it, the younger one has to do it. Becomes problematic when you have to be 52 inches tall and the other one's not, and then we can't go on any of the rides at Adventureland. The one-on-one time is something that, I like to educate, to focus on, but the big thing is the phone. Like imagine if you're out with somebody and they're on their phone the whole time. When your buddies from college, you're on a date or whatever, and every time they talk to you, they're like, what? And like they almost like don't care, right? And they're in their phone. Every time you say something, they seem like they could not care any less. And I realized, it's just habitual. It's so easy. I'm not saying it's an addiction, but, in the mortgage side, just to be transparent, if somebody calls or texts and I don't answer quickly, I either can lose the client or lose the referral partner that we work with. So, that's in the back of my mind. I also discovered that if I'm intentional and put my phone on silent and I'm there with my kids doing the thing, whatever that means, Roblox or God knows the games they're playing, they just want me to be there in it with them. You know what happens, Jeff, in that 30 minutes to 60 minutes when I'm present with my other job? You know what happens? Nothing. The world doesn't end. No one passes away. It's just one of those things. It's more entrepreneur in the back of my mind, but I couldn't empathize anymore. My kids are my little heartstrings, but man, I was called out
Yeah.
hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So let me ask you, so in plain language, just to keep it simple for strategies, which daily behaviors correlate with better child outcomes?
What daily behaviors? So for from a research standpoint, we've talked about just being present, being intentional in your fathering. And the other thing I think that plays out too, so we talked about generational fathering, that we learn how to father from our fathers. And then for men who do not, so part of is being mindful of where did I get my fathering ideas, habits, things from, right? So if we look at what are four influences on you being a dad. So the most influential part is your dad,
So
and
number one, your dad.
your dad is number one. And so in my old age now, I find myself saying things that my dad said, like, "Oh, God, I sound like my dad right there, and so being mindful of where that's coming from, right? And then secondly would be your family, right? So if you didn't grow up with a dad, your next sphere of influence would be families and family of origin. And then third would be your peers and friends, and then the last would be society. So if you're a father and you're like, okay, so how did I get to this place where I think about fatherhood this way? Just check your sphere of influence, right? As we talk about generational fathering, we learn how to father from our fathers. And so sometimes, and so some of the people, if you're like, hey, I had a great dad. And I love the way you asked me the question, like, what are some things that your dad did? And then what was something he can improve in? Then we got to think about our relationship with our dad. So we men rarely think about, I'm fathering the way my father fathered me, or I'm fathering maybe from a deficit model that I didn't have a good relationship with my father, or I didn't have a relationship at all with my dad. So where am I getting these fathering patterns from, right? And so, again, it's important to really understand how you're fathering. And the one thing I encourage men to do is as you begin to think about this, think about things your father gave you that you want to give to your child. And then also think about things your father gave you, left you, that you don't want to give to your child. Because if you don't make that mental connection about what are you transferring in your experience with your dad to your child, then we tend to just emulate some of those same things. And so what I encourage men to do is to kind of compartmentalize that. Okay, so what are some things my dad did? We talked about being on the phone or whatever that, yeah, I ain't really like that. So I'm not going to do that to my child. What are some things that you really love that your dad did? Oh, we played ball together or what have you, that I want to pass on to my children, and then be intentional about doing that. And then the last part is what are some goals or, you know, things that I want for my child, and how do I, as a dad, help my child to get there? And so I think it goes with the intention. People talk about intentionality of being a dad, but we can't isolate that intentionality of being a dad unless we tap into, why am I the type of father that I am? What's influencing me in being a dad? Again, it's easy for me to be that workaholic because my dad was an entrepreneur, had his own business. And, even though he lived in a house with us, I might go 2 or 3 days without seeing him because he was gone the morning before we got up, and then we were in the bed by the time he got home. So I kind of learned that behavior, but also, again, in my mind, like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to be a dad that my kids don't see every day, and not just see, but hey, let's sit down and have some time together. Let's sit down and have a meal. Let's watch the game together. Let's do some stuff together. So, just to kind of bring this to a closure, as an intentional father, understand how you learn what fathering is to you, and then what are you transferring to your child.
Yeah, I mean, you're just talking a hyper awareness, right? Awareness. And
Yes.
it's just one of those things, to our point of our conversation, which is so cool, especially with, our Dad Up movement, where we're on a mission that it's okay, dads, to live, we call it the emo, right? To be emotional, to think about this stuff. This doesn't make you not manly. This doesn't make you not masculine. Masculine guy isn't the winner of a UFC fight or the Super Bowl winner. The guy that's in tune with his emotions. To your point, I'm similar to you, a big thinker. Why? My childhood. What I grew up with my mom and my dad, and then I had a stepfather and a stepmother, and now I have stepsisters. Like, how did that influence me? What are some of the good takeaways? What are some things I would have changed? I live in that, call it the emo, but I just think that it's okay for guys to do the same, and it doesn't make you less of a man. To me, it actually promotes the agenda that you're a better father and you're potentially a better man in society. So what do you think some of the barriers for fathers, and what programs are there that actually think help fathers with it?
Well, we start thinking about barriers. So we kind of alluded to a little bit that we don't understand our importance, because society tells us that we're a paycheck, right? Society tells us that if we're paying child support, we're a good dad. No one's bothering you. You send a check to the other side of town, right? You take care of the other household. But that's not where the benefit lies, right? We get down to the hierarchy of needs. Yes, we got to, sleep. We got to eat and clothing and shelter, but that's just basic necessities. And so I think society has sent a message that if we're being supportive, if we are being providers, then we're being a good dad. Well, we know that that's not just a benefit, right? It is being intentional, it is being there. Going back to something earlier you said about the dad jokes and all that, and so society has also said that men are bumbling, stumbling idiots when it comes to fatherhood, right? Where even, early infant development stuff, no, you are wired to father your natural way. And so you're not a bumbling, stumbling idiot. You are a compassionate, great caretaker of children. We just stuff, man. Oh, I'm babysitting my kids. No, you're not babysitting your kids. And I remember I had two in diapers at one time. So my wife had to travel, and Jada was 3 months old, and Jara my middle daughter was 2 and some change, almost 3. And everybody was like, well, what you gonna do with the baby? What you gonna do with the baby? And my wife was like, she got a whole functional father right here. It was just
helpless, useless, oh, you're gonna leave him alone with that guy, right?
And I was taken aback. I'm like, who they think I am? I'm 3 kids in, it's
You're like, babe, I don't know what to do, babe. This one pooped. This one's not eating. What do I do? And they're just like, no, we got this. Come on.
You get it, right? That's the message we send. For my wife to have so many friends. Well, what are you gonna do? You going out of town for 4 days? What are you gonna do with the baby? And my wife is like, what do you mean what I'm gonna do with the baby? She's gonna stay with Jeff the whole time, And so part of it is, so no one in my work, I've not met a father who didn't want to be a good dad. It is circumstances, him not understanding what that really looks like, relationship with mom. We know one of the biggest influences on father being there for his child is his relationship with the mom. So a lot of times men compartmentalize that stuff, okay, I'm in love with the mom, I'm in love with my child's mother, and so I'm going to do the things to take care of them. And so we just had to have a conversation with men sometime when that relationship with mom is severed, that you still have to be intentional, because sometimes in our mind, all that goes kind of together. And so we have to help men be the fathers that they want to be. In my work with non-residential dads and things of that nature, and you talked about programs. There are fatherhood programs, but if you really think about the support that's available, philanthropic, governmental support that's available to mothers in comparison to fathers, is a huge disparity. So when we talk about non-residential dads, some of the studies I've done and saying, so what are the supports you need to be the type of father you want to be? And that's a very impactful question, right? What community supports are available for you to be the type of father you want to be? So if you work with men who come from a background, they didn't have positive father's influence, maybe not even seen one in their community, but, I say there's a paradigm shift because men are starting to realize how important fatherhood is. And, from what we see on TV and, public service announcements and all the things, but I don't have the mechanism to be the type of father I want to be. And now I'm looking at the landscape where mothers have plenty of opportunities to be the types of mothers that they want to be through resources. And a lot of times these same entities don't have resources for fathers. But no man wants to be a bad dad. We are, as a society, are providing resources for him to be the type of father he wants to be.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, listen, if I could be part of the movement that changes everything that you just said and presses the agenda and pushes it forward on how important that is, let's do it together. So it's funny, you bring up child support. So I'm just curious, your advice for dads building trust in step or blended families or contexts. So like first 30 days, we were talking about it previous, how there's so many things that are so important that you just wing in life, right? So like as an example, you look like a stud, you've been to the gym, right? You don't just like show up to the gym, throw on a few plates, have no idea what you're doing. Next thing you know, you tear a pec or a bicep, right? So it's the same thing. At this point, I don't know if there's actual data, you probably know way better than me, with the average first marriage with kids that ends up in a divorce. It's over 50%, I'm sure, but whatever that number is, there's remarriage, and then there's introduction of other families and the whole, step-parent dynamic. And I feel like, even my personal experiences with my stepfather, that there is a bit of a black cloud around it, that he, as much as, and listen, he was there. So me and my brother were what? 6'2", 6'3", big football players, right? We eat a lot of food. My stepfather is Italian. He can cook. He can garden. He played musical instruments, plays piano. So he was a little shorter than us, nothing crazy, but just a little. And, he had daughters. So we used to eat the guy out of house and home. And, he came to all my football games. He was there definitely early. He had no idea, I'm pretty sure, initially. Like he made a joke in front of all my friends. It's third down, punt the ball. No one would expect it. It's kind of embarrassing. But the point is, he did the thing. He worked as a teacher. He had private lessons, came home late. He provided for all of us. And it was always the worst thing. It was like, he would be so proud to, like, oh, these are my boys, me and my brother. These are my boys. Well, no, they're my stepkids, Jeff. And it was always like, I don't know, something about, it felt like the scarlet letter. So I feel like we, at least in Data Up, are so passionate about the step parenting space, the foster space, the adoptive space. So that's why we're calling those dads flex dads, right? And we have all these cool names for the kids. You call them flexies because, like, does a kid go, so like, I'm the adopted kid, or I'm a foster child, or even I'm his step kid. It's, they wish tried bonus dad. I feel like everything has failed. But I do feel very passionate that it's really a space that's very important. It's never going away. There are, unfortunately, divorces. There are, of course, remarriages. So with that, I feel like there's so much, like, quote unquote, let's wing it, right? Let's just wing it. I'll just become the stepdad. But like, even if you could map out a plan, the first 30 days, like you meet, you're dating someone, they're going to introduce their kids to you. Is there some type of behavior or strategy or anything? I mean, any type of nugget you can give us, because frankly, it'll be better than what exists, which is really nothing. So what do you think around the whole step-parent blended space?
Yeah, you're right. There are, certainly pretty high divorce rate, and blended families are becoming the norm. I am in a blended family. I met my oldest daughter when she was 5 and married her mother when she was 6. And yeah, we don't talk about I don't say rules and regulations, but the policies or the what needs to be done.
Wait, there's no SOP, standard operating procedure?
That's not a standard operating procedure. I actually talk a little bit about those things in my book, where it's whether you are a father with children or you meeting or your significant other, a potential significant other has a child. I always say is we have to be careful about introducing our children to numerous adults, particularly if that child is going to have a relationship. And we wanted to make sure it's going to be a long-term relationship. So I was in the fatherhood space when I met my wife, and, was hesitant only because of understanding how that might impact the child. So until I knew we were engaged, and it was like, okay, this is going to, and not just meeting her at the door, maybe, picking my future wife up at her mom's house because she was, watching the grandchild and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" But like, like hanging out and forming a relationship, like that's taken to another level. So we got to protect children in those instances. And as a person coming in from the outside, I think it's going to be unique based on the relationship, based on that child's biological father in this instance. So I can talk about it from a couple sides. So one is, what is your role as a step parent? Now, if you walk into a situation where the biological father's not present, out of state, this, that, and the other, and you go take more of a traditional fatherhood role, you just got, it depends, you got to figure out as outside looking in, what is my role going to be in this situation? Because you don't want it to be chaotic for the child, that it's just this big disruption thing, what have you. And then I also need to talk about biological fathers who their children are living with mom and she's starting a date or whatever. So I often, we know that children can potentially be in at-risk situations where there are other men being introduced to them. And so one of the things that I say is, one way of protecting your child, and again, this goes way deep, bro, because you got to have a good co-parent relationship with mom. Y'all got to be on the same page. I know it's a lot of different layers to this, but I'm saying idealistically here. Hey, I need to be introduced to this person that's going to be as significant as a biological father. I need to be introduced to this man who is going to have a relationship with my child, particularly my young daughter or teenage daughter or whatever. And then I need to go in as a biological father, say, hey man, we co-parenting to the new guy and saying, hey, no animosity here, man. I hope y'all work out. I'm just letting you know I'm around. This is my daughter. I hope I have hope you and I can have a good relationship, kind of setting the tone. Because that doesn't often happen. I have a real heart out for co-parents and blended families. And in my own experience, Jordan and I's dad, again, high school sweethearts, went to college together, and he was a good dad. He was always around, always present. And, I come in and meet and marry my wife. And first time I saw her, less than 2 years. And him and I developed a relationship. So, daughter was a big basketball player. And so he come over in the summer, and him and I would sit in the stands together and watch her play games. And she was playing summer travel ball or whatever. And people found that to be odd. Like, why your dad and stepdad sitting in the stands together? But she never found anything wrong with that,
That
and
should
to
be
his
the
credit,
norm, to your
it
point.
was a
That should
norm.
be the norm.
It was a norm, right? We're gonna collectively raise this child together, right? And that's how it has to be in the blended family, co-parenting, all the things that we're gonna come together and raise this child together. And so that's kind of all she knew. When, for a prime example, just some examples of how it can work. He always paid for her cell phone when she was a teenager or whatever, and if she got in trouble because she lived with me and told the different states, I would call him up and say, hey, man, Jordan, he brought home some bad grades or whatever, so I'm going to have her phone for the next couple of weeks. If you need to get in contact with her, just call the house or whatever. As a biological dad, some dudes will go left. I'm paying, you give my baby her phone back, I'm paying for her phone, whatever. I always give him credit because he understood the big picture. He was like, all right, cool, I appreciate it. I appreciate it for you for letting me know. So him and I always had a great communication, because there again, our goal, we were joined in our goal was to raise Jordan in a good environment. So he understood that she's living with me. I'm protecting her. I'm not overstepping my role because I'm not her biological father. I'm her stepdad, but we're going to come together and do all the things to make sure she's in a good environment. And I also understood, and not to belabor this, I also understood, she was a Division I basketball player. She was being recruited, that he couldn't be there as I was taking on visits. So I would text him like, hey man, we heard from this school, we're making this visit, this, that, and the other. And he would be like, I appreciate it, so we can make this work in regards to blended families, co-parenting, whatever, if our goal is to raise the child. If we get out of all the relationship stuff if the adults aren't messy, we can make it work.
It's almost like respect, empowerment, and then the mission, meaning and everything that you said around your stepdaughter's father. You guys had a mutual respect. You definitely empowered each other, which is, listen, you're there, you're present. So, you put your foot down with some of the stuff you said, and he empowered you to do so, which is big, non-ego.
That's right.
And it all worked because collectively you had the same mission. The mission was you wanted to bring this young lady from point A to point B as a good, law-abiding, ethical, moral, good person. And to your point, I feel like that, it's the same thing. Like, oh my God, that dad is so in his emotions. Like, who talks about that? And you're like, why? Why is it weird if a dad says how he feels and sits with his kids? And it's the same type of concept. You're like, I don't understand. Jeff and her dad, they just sit there and they look like they're friendly. How is that possible? And you're like, I don't understand how that's not possible. I feel like, to your point, it just is very society-based media, movies, TV shows, redheaded stepchild. Like, it doesn't have to be that way, to your point.
Yeah, and that's the point where I always go back to when she was a teenager. Her friend was like, it's like, why wouldn't that be the norm? Like, we're all on the same team, and it should be the norm. And so I share that story, and I appreciate allowing me to share the story, because as we increase in blended families, it can be successful. It really can be successful. And whether you're the new guy coming into a situation or you have a child that's being introduced to new people, like, I would always believe, and I haven't been in this situation, but I would like to believe that if my daughters, and I got 3 of them, were being introduced to another man because my wife and I separated, she's dating again, I would like to think that I would go through and offer the olive branch, like, hey, I'm around. These are my daughters. I'm not interfering with what you all do, but I'm here. My daughters are with me. I'm going to be around, come to pick them up, this, that, and the other. Because at the very least, I'm going to go back to that. That is a protective mechanism. If you are a bad guy with bad intentions, and you step into that situation, and it's another man around who's like, hey, I'm here to protect my little girls, that's a protective mechanism. So I just think, but they're, again, offering an olive branch, like, hey, let's just do this thing together, man. If y'all are, going on down the road with you all's relationship, I'm going to be around for duration. So I think it's something that
Jeff,
we need to talk about.
You are, Jeff, a scholar in the space. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's almost ridiculous, the question I'm going to ask you. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, Jeff. And the first example, to your daughter, right? Your stepdaughter, she's playing basketball, as an example, in the stands. Her dad, her stepdad, they're broing it out. They're loving on her. They're cool, non-volatile. Game ends. They're not like weird. Who's going to go up to her first, which exists. You go up, great game, high fives. See you later, bro. Like, broing it out. Is there a direct correlation of that child's development, being on the positive side? Or example, the other, example would be child's playing basketball. Maybe it's a girl. Maybe the moms. There's a mom and a stepmom. They're not sitting next to each other. And it's known in the family. Mom and stepmom don't like each other. They don't talk. So what happens? The game ends. One comes, the stepmom, for instance, always like the bad stepmom, right? It's like what society says. It's probably not true, but it's just, right? The stepmom comes up, hey, great game. The mom's there rolling her eyes behind her, and then, like, the stepmom awkwardly leaves. The mom comes in like, oh, I can't believe, call her Elizabeth. I can't believe Elizabeth came. It's like, not, that environment. Think about the kid. They didn't choose their parents to get divorced. They didn't choose. They're not in control of their step-parent and parent, again, who they didn't choose to not get along. So it's an environment, a chaotic environment, especially emotionally, that they have no control over. The frustration, the disappointment, how is that fair to them? And I could say, as a scholar, if you had those 2 experiences, isn't it like 1 + 1 is 2, right? The first experience, which is really you and the father, the likelihood of a better developmental period for them versus the other having to internalize that. And I mean, it's not even a question. You don't have to have a doctor to realize maybe you shouldn't do the second experience.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. And even if you're feeling some type of way because of things that were said or whatever, it is not appropriate to share that with your kids, even into their teenage years. Like, it's same thing with your wife, right? My daughters didn't know when my wife and I argued. because we would go in the room and close the door. It's like they didn't know we argued. They didn't know, like, because we never displayed. I mean, we would have healthy conversations. That put it this way, but just like marriage stuff, that
Not blowouts, like
right below, I
nothing.
was like, yeah, like we would have literally arguments, but we would never have them in front of our kids. And the same thing with the same relationships, like studies that we just doing a study with the Moynihan Institute about fathers non-residential fathers raising their daughters, and now their daughters are grown, and talk about the impacts of not living with their dad or what have you. And some of the things that came out of that was how their perception of their father was so tailored or influenced by what their mom said, you know, and that now that they are, late 20s, early 30s, and they're really getting to know their dad, that a lot of what their mom said isn't true. It might have been true in the past, but at least they're having their own relationship. And, I often say that what benefit does it do any of us to put the other parent in a bad light? Like, what your mom said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Like, so two things are going to happen. Your child is going to figure out that their dad or their mom is not up to par and whatever, or they're going to figure out that what you've been telling them has not been the truth, and that's been your perception. And so you allow your child to figure out this information themselves, and they can come up with their own conclusion about their parent, or they can turn against you. They can be like, you lied about my dad, or you lied about my mom the whole time. And so we don't need to display the information. And your 8-year-old, your 10-year-old don't even need to know this chaos exists. Like, why share that in this situation? And as they become teenagers, they begin to observe how things are themselves, and you don't even need to influence them. And I just think it's about keeping your child in a protective environment, And again, that's the intentionality of parenting. Hey, let's just keep them in a protective environment. They don't need to see all the mess that's going on with adults. They'll figure it out in their early 20s. They'll figure it out in their late teens, but they don't need to be exposed to that at 10, 12, 13 years old. Like, we all need to at least be singing Kumbaya, be on the same page, which I think is important to children's development.
Yeah, I mean, we can agree, Jeff, that parenting is work. You don't just, to your point, put food on the table, change their poopy diaper, and make sure that they're still breathing. I mean, these are obviously the non-negotiables, but just like, right, your marriage is work. You gotta have date night, you gotta listen, men are from wherever, women are from wherever, like, it's just like sometimes we have different communication styles, but if you want any relationship to work, especially husband, wife, you have to put in the work. And being a great parent, you have to put in the work, which includes healthy communication and being very intentional on what you do or don't do, and it's just not like wing it. So I couldn't agree with you anymore. But if we wanted to turn your last 10 years of findings into a 30-day plan, what 3 pillars must be there?
Okay. Last 10 years of research. So first, number one is you matter. When I say you, fathers matter. Fathers offer something unique. Don't allow society to pin you. And some of this is repetitive that we've said before, but don't allow society to tell you you're just a provider. I see men working 60, 70 hours a week because they're trying to buy the iPhone or the Jordans or whatever. And literally, if you think back on your life, rarely you're going to remember what your dad bought you. You're going to remember the times that are spent. Another thing is, again, being intentional in your fathering. Father on purpose, as I often say. And
I love that. Father on purpose.
Father on purpose. So as you think about, think about your daughters or sons or whatever, like, you have to intentionally be in their life, even when they're doing things that don't excite you, and making kind of what you said, making opportunities to dialogue, dad-daughter dates, all the things as you kind of alluded to, because as children develop, particularly when they get to teenage years, their friends become their biggest influencers, become way more important than parents. And so the only way you can kind of stay in your child's life, particularly girls, is to understand what's going on in their head, have some time and ask the questions and be present, be interested in things they're interested in, no matter what that is. Be interested in things they're interested in. I thank God that, again, all my daughters play ball. So it was like, Dad, can we go to the gym? Can you go catch the ball, put up some shots or whatever? But I swear, if they were in cheering or if they're in the dance group or whatever, I would have been there, because that's the only way particularly with girls, you can kind of stay engaged with them. You got to be interested in what they're interested in so you can kind of figure out what's going on, where their mind is. And the last thing, for a dad, as a girl dad, we have to, understand our impacts on on our daughters. And this really hits home too. Unlike our sons, where we have kind of direct impact on how they father, how they view life, and responsibility, all the things, we have to be mindful that when we're raising daughters, our impact is important, but also they internalize how we treat their mothers. And so I could be the best dad in the world with being hands-on, affirming my daughter, doing the dad daughters thing, providing, supporting her. But it really counters that if I'm treating her mother out of respect, or disrespecting her mother, or talking to her mother. So just think of it this way, you know, I can see what you're doing so loud I don't hear a word you're saying. So yeah, you could be the best dad with your daughter, but she is literally internalizing how she see you treat her mother. And so I tell men all the time, when she brings this guy home for the prom, or she brings this guy home that she's interested in, you're like, where'd she find this clown? Like, where'd she find it? I always tell guys, hey, look in the mirror, because at some point in your life, some point in her life, this resonates with her.
So the three big takeaways, which I love, are dadders out there, you're more than just a paycheck, right? You matter. So like, that's cool. Let's own it and let's matter and let's work on that. The second thing is, of course, intentional, showing up, being intentional, being a part of what they do, loving on their stuff so they feel like, their feelings and their emotions and their likes matter. Super cool. And for me, what resonates is the third piece, being a girl dad. Your relationship with your daughter is a piece of it. The relationship with the mom, you're just modeling behaviors and things that they're going to internalize and feel, well, I love him. He provides. He takes care of me. If that's how he treats someone important to him, then I might look for something similar. I mean, it's like basic psychology. So it's really the importance of that. The day doesn't end necessarily with how you just treat the daughter. It ends with the modeling of the behaviors with the mother, right?
That's perfect. Good job.
Nailed it. All right. So that nailed it, Russell. A in the class. So that segues into our Flex Fire segment. So I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions. You'll give us, your quick Jeff answers. Super excited to hear your answers. So one finding from your research that still surprises you.
That still surprises me. The whole idea that we really matter and that we offer something unique. It still surprises me how impactful we really are.
What's one habit you see in highly engaged dads?
Attentiveness and intentionality.
Love it. Complete this sentence. Legacy is
being there, being intentional, and creating memories.
What's the biggest myth about dads that the data crushes?
That we are just a paycheck.
A policy change that would help dads immediately.
Non-residential fathers getting credit for child support payments by being involved with their child, coaching a team, doing other things that aren't just monetary.
Wow, that's big. What's a book or a quote you recommend to any new father out there?
Well, of course, I have to recommend my book, What All Dads Should Know.
And the link's in the description, right, guys? Link in the description. Click the link at his book.
That covers all the developmental stuff. And yeah, I think we said it before. I hate to be that father on purpose. Be intentional in your fathering. Yeah.
So here's a personal one, right? You talk about your stepdaughter playing basketball. It sounds like you're good at hoops, right? Right about you're walking out on the field, or you're walking out on the court. What song is playing for you?
Wow.
What's your come out song, baby? What's the come out song? Come on.
I had to go old school.
Say YMCA, please, God.
We are the champions, my friend.
There you go. And to the point, we're going to do a little curveball here. So if you had a 3-person team, pickup league, you and 2 other dads, who, real or fictional, what other 2 dads would you want on your pickup league team? Gotta be dads.
Gotta be dads. Well, come off the top of my head would be LeBron and Steph.
I know it, yeah. All right, perfect. So listen, Jeff, thank you so much for giving me the time. Had decades in the scholarship into every language around the dad space. So I appreciate it so much. You've helped make fatherhood measurable and teachable. And that's the heartbeat of Dad Are Up. I mean, I personally have learned so much from you. I mean, listen, there's always like the girl dad vibes. Like somehow we just like, get it. But I couldn't have any more respect for you. So thank you so much for coming on our show. Now, we always end with our Dadarian creed. So I'm going to say it, and then you got to do me a favor. Can you take us out?
Sure thing.
All right, cool. So here we go. So I'm a dadder. I don't chase perfect. I chase presence. I lead quiet and confident. I build my family, my foundation, and my legacy. I take reps in patience, discipline, and love. I break old patterns, not promises. Legacy isn't someday, it's today. Jeff, take us out.
Let's dad.
That's it, baby. Thank you so much, Jeff. You are
Hi.
amazing. I'm definitely going to try to have you back on again in the future. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you then.